29. The Instantaneous Way to the Stars. In Operation Earth, I used the title, The Way to the Stars, as a chapter heading, and I think that it should be included again here with the addition of the one all-important word. Since the original chapter was written, some very exciting ideas have been aired. However, first let us digress for a moment. Some years ago, a very distinguished British astronomer was interviewed on a TV program about UFOs. He stated that they could not possibly come from our solar system, because our probes had established that no life could exist there. He may be right on this point, but it remains to be completely proven. And that they could not come here from elsewhere in the galaxy, because of the tremendous distance involved in terms of light years, and anyway, nothing could possibly exceed the speed of light. No doubt, at the time this distinguished man gave this interview, that may have been the accepted scientific view, though I rather think that even then some of our more enlightened scientists were looking to the possibilities of stellar travel, quite apart from how UFOs could come here. Today, our new breed of scientists do not look at far-reaching concepts and condemn them out of hand because they are not in accordance with accepted scientific thought. They think, this is an interesting idea. We will not necessarily accept nor discard it. We will examine it thoroughly, and see if anything else comes along to give it some validity. In fact, today, many of our most respected scientists are coming up themselves with really fantastic ideas, as we shall see. In Operation Earth I wrote, some scientists realize that it is possible to travel faster than the speed of light. When this happens, we get beyond the limits of space and time into an unknown area, the eternal now 5, that the mystics talk about. You see, as we pass the speed of light, times 5, as it is known to us, ceases to exist. And then strange things happen. For the simple reason that human times 5 has stopped, our thinking changes. We are now in a different continuum, a new universe. For many years now, science fiction writers have been telling us about a hypothetical area called hyperspace, into which their imaginary spaceships entered, whereas I wrote in Operation Earth, we get beyond the limits of space and time, into an unknown area 5, and by using this unknown route, the distance and time to the stars is shortened to an incredible degree. In fact, as we shall see later, travel to the stars becomes instantaneous. Recently, the Daily Telegraph Color magazine ran a series of 3 fascinating science articles by Adrian Berry. The second one discussed Professor John Wheeler's interpretation of Albert Einstein's second work, The General Theory of Relativity, published in 1916, following upon the Special Theory of Relativity, which appeared in 1905. Professor Wheeler's study and interpretation of Einstein's general theory of relativity brings the whole idea of hyperspace within the realms of probability. Dr. Wheeler is professor of physics at Princeton University and a co-inventor of the hydrogen bomb. The professor, in a paper delivered in 1962, visualized that space contains, as he termed them, wormholes, or entrances into another universe, which he called Superspace 5, akin to the Hyperspace 5 of science fiction writers. Einstein pointed out that there is no such thing as a straight line. Space is curved, believe it or not. However, this curvature is only noticeable over a very wide area. The reason everything is curved in space is because of the effect of gravitational forces. The Daily Telegraph Color magazine showed a picture of Professor Wheeler holding a donut with its traditional hole in the middle. They, also, depicted a donut model of the universe. To quote, "All the stars and galaxies are on the curved solid surface of the donut. The hole inside represents the mysterious region of superspace, in which space and time do not exist. All journeys through it are therefore instantaneous. A signal, or spaceship, traveling directly across superspace might be able to reach its destination in no time at all, in contrast to a journey round the curved surface which would take centuries. Apparently, space is not just nothing, but actually a solid. It has holes in it just like a piece of smooth furniture seen under a powerful microscope." Professor Wheeler's work and tentative conclusions are especially interesting to me, because they seem to be validating my cosmic concept, which was first published in a much deeper form in 1964. As you will recall, I postulated that our chemical universe, and that includes its space, is inside what I termed the cosmic emotional universe, one of the fourfold cosmic universes. Now, you see that Professor Wheeler suggests that superspace, an area where time and space, as we know it, does not exist, is basically there in that the solidified donut of galaxies, suns, planets, and our space, exists in it. You can well imagine how thrilled I was to read about Professor Wheeler's work. We are still a long way off from putting Professor Wheeler's theory to practical purposes. For instance, where are the wormholes? An immediate question comes to my inquisitive mind. It is this. Do Ivan Sanderson's 10 vile vortices discussed in Chapter 14 have any connection with the professor's wormholes? Could they be major entrances on this planet to hyperspace or superspace? Everything in this universe seems to be arranged in a very mathematical way. Therefore, it seems to me that Sanderson's 10 vortices, which are also placed in an orderly, geometrical manner, may prove to be the key to this enigma. Be that as it may, what is now becoming more and more apparent is that someday, it may be a long way off yet, we will be able to reach the stars through what the science fiction writers call hyperspace, and Professor Wheeler terms superspace. It is absolutely amazing how science fiction writers, over and over again, seem to have the knack of hitting the nail on the head, by predicting in advance the realities of tomorrow. I sometimes think that their minds are influenced and inspired, probably unbeknown to themselves, by our mysterious visitors. They would probably deny this suggestion. These splendid, imaginative and creative writers would, no doubt, state that the ideas were their own. That in a sense is true. But, I question whether any real idea is entirely our own. However, right now, I would like to pay tribute to the wonderful line of science fiction writers who have done so much to entertain us, stir our imaginations and predict so accurately many of the wonders that have come to pass. We salute H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, and also Jonathan Swift. I include the latter for his accurate assessment of the 2 satellites of Mars, Phobos, and Deimos, in Gulliver's Travels, 150 years before they were officially discovered by Asaph Hall, the American astronomer in 1877. In our own time, we have such giants as Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein, John Campbell, Theodore Sturgeon, Paul Anderson, Clifford Simak, and many others of this brilliant fraternity. In particular, Asimov has done a tremendous job in propagating the idea of a galactic civilization in his stories and, also, of writing about hyperspace. So, it seems that one day we will travel to the stars through Asimov's hyperspace, but surely, the corollary could also take effect. If we can go to the stars in this manner, then the sky people can come here, despite what the respected British astronomer said some years ago. Another point. If the UFOs suddenly manifest out of wormholes or vile vortices on the Earth's surface, it is possible they would escape the radar network that our politicians are always telling us the UFOs can't get through without being detected. It has always seemed to me a bit naive when ministers in the House of Commons have stated in answer to a question about UFO activity, that the UFOs couldn't get through our radar network without being spotted. Does it not strike any of these eminent gentlemen, that an alien race which has had space travel for millennia, would, by now have discovered a means of entering our airspace without being detected by our silly old radar, of which we are so rightly proud? They have probably got systems far more advanced, and ways of evading our radar brought to a very high state of perfection. I have long ago reached the stage of reading statements by ministers on this subject in the national press with a pinch of salt. The fact is, the flying saucers can come and go, as they like, and our aircraft and radar can do nothing about it. There are many reports on record that prove this. They have been seen on radar and visually from the ground. They have also been seen visually in the air, and from the ground, but not picked up by radar in the vicinity. So, they can pick and choose what they want to do. We are really in their hands. There is nothing we can do about it. However, for reasons expressed earlier, I do not think the real sky people are hostile to us. It is my contention that they put us here, and are watching over our development. There do seem to be some hostile ones pertaining to the invisible area around our planet, and that is the accepted view of many leading ufologists. However, the real sky people who live far out, it would seem, are keeping a weather eye on us. In a sense, as Charles Fort stated in one of his remarkable books, we are property. Yes, it could be said that we are property, for as you have seen, if you go along with the traditional stories from all over the world, we were made by them, put here, and since then they have interbred with us, watched our development, and injected shots in the arm. So, All right, it could be said they own us, but I do not think they regard us in that light anymore. When humans were first made, they were an unknown quantity. Now, with some slight assistance, we have come a long way, and are graduating for membership of a galactic civilization. In time, we will be possibly kicked upstairs, into the cosmic emotional universe as fully fledged members, at least some of us will, after the planet has settled its present chaotic period of transition, change and general upheaval, spiritually, mentally, physically, and economically. The Daily Telegraph Color magazine ended its second science article by stating about Wheeler. This extraordinary thinker, who has developed the theories of Einstein, just as Einstein himself modified and enlarged upon the laws of Sir Isaac Newton, is doing work today that may one day give us a galactic empire. I would like to rewrite the end of this concluding paragraph in the article, as follows. Is doing work today that may one day give us the opportunity of being accepted in a galactic civilization. It is always the human idea to conquer and take over. There may be other intelligences in the galaxy waiting, and hoping for us to join them, but not on takeover terms. We will have to learn to live the galactic way, and a little less, the violent human one. 30. Time is short. We started this book by giving a review of the worldwide UFO situation, and mentioned the mysterious part played by intelligence agencies in attempting to play down the whole business. It was postulated that the authorities appreciated that the UFOs were paranormal, and that probably, they did not have all the answers. If they were to announce that UFOs were real, then they would have some very awkward questions to answer. Better, play it cool and hope that the maddening UFOs would go away. Despite the Condon Committee's negative conclusion being given wide newspaper coverage, and their publication in paperback form, there is a tremendous interest in the subject. We have only to witness the enormous worldwide success of Erich von Däniken's books, dealing with the possibility that sky people may have visited us in ancient times to realize this. It is possible that as more people become aware of the reality of the UFOs, there are now literally hundreds of UFO groups throughout the world, then a general acceptance could come from the public themselves. From time to time, articles appear highlighting new scientific discoveries, in the press and magazines. The Daily Telegraph Color magazine series of scientific articles, just discussed in our last chapter, has done a signal service in writing about Professor Wheeler's concept of superspace, and suggesting that one day we may be able to reach the stars in no time at all. Those readers of the article who have been told that UFOs cannot come here, because of the vast distances involved, will possibly think again. Gradually, as this theme of Wheeler's develops, and, you can be sure we will hear more of it, the idea will be implanted without anyone saying so, that the UFOs could come here, after all. Then, as I say, a gradual, general acceptance of their reality may come from the public themselves, without an official announcement. A fait accompli. All this, of course, would delight the authorities, and help them over a difficult hurdle. However, it would seem imperative to bring about this general recognition in the shortest possible time. Furthermore, to develop the practical side of Professor Wheeler's theory as soon as possible, we know about the growing dangers of pollution to our food, our air, our oceans and our land, as well as to the animals, birds, fish and ourselves. We have, also, been told about the overpopulation problem and the worldwide famine which may grow to astronomical proportions, engulfing the West, as well as the East. Additionally, we know that there are more wars going on all over the world than at any previous time in history. The Middle East situation is still not resolved, and could explode into a third world war at any moment. It is more than obvious that our civilization cannot go on like this for very much longer. It would seem that the crunch is coming. Whether it will take the form of a series of worldwide catastrophes, as foretold by the seer of Virginia Beach, the late Edgar Cayce, who had an incredible number of bull's eyes to his credit, or an Armageddon, or perhaps both, it is impossible to predict. Quite seriously, it would seem on the cards that something will have to act as a catalyst. I know that in an earlier chapter I took an optimistic view, but I did state that some of these events might come to pass. On the other hand, patterns can change. A seer can predict something quite genuinely based on what is seen ahead in his own time. However, circumstances can alter, and these changes could throw the seer's predictions. It seems to me that Professor Wheeler's theory about superspace could bring about a correction in the predicted pattern, provided that the work is expedited. The greatest problem at the moment is overpopulation. Most of the other worldwide problems derive from that one. Famine, housing, pollution, and even wars. World population in the next few decades is going to snowball to an alarming degree. If Professor Wheeler's ideas can be developed and turned to practical use within the next few years, then we will be able to reach other star systems, and perhaps, find uninhabited planets. Then, large portions of our population will be able to emigrate to these new worlds, like our ancestors sailed overseas to the new land of America. Incidentally, Adrian Barry in his first article in the Daily Telegraph Color magazine, had an amazing proposition which links up with what I have just suggested. He mentioned the imaginative ideas of Professor Carl Sagan, whom we have already quoted earlier in this book. He has a scheme to change the environment of Venus so that our people could live there. As we all know, our satellite probes of Venus have indicated that it has an unbearably hot temperature on the surface of 1000 degrees Fahrenheit, 480 Celsius. Incidentally, at one time Venus was thought to have a much lower temperature. When Dr. Immanuel Velikovsky in his book, Worlds in Collision, stated the opposite, this was one of the many points that the scientists at the time of publication of his book some years ago now, came down heavily on him about, and indeed, there was a big furor. I am happy that not only on this point of the temperature of Venus, but on other ones, Dr. Velikovsky has been completely vindicated. Sagan's fantastic idea is to send a few hundred algae-bearing rockets to Venus to produce rain, and turn that planet into a habitable place for us. Well, as you can see, some of the greatest minds in the world are turning their attention to resolving ways by which humanity may be able to move out from this overcrowded planet Earth, into the galaxy and live on renovated worlds. And, that they will reach them through superspace. All these concepts are beyond the average thinking of most people. The advanced scientist of today is way out ahead. Modern technology and thinking is moving now at a stupendous pace. They may yet beat the catastrophe barrier discussed at the beginning of this chapter. And, you can be sure that the boys upstairs will be behind them. We have been based on Mother Earth long enough. It is time some of our more adventurous young people went off exploring the cosmos, like in the last Elizabethan age, our seamen found new lands in the Americas. In this present Elizabethan age our astronauts, using Professor Wheeler's superspace route to the stars, may find new worlds to populate in the galaxy. This is a magnificent task, not beyond human capabilities. So, you see, there is a tremendous tomorrow. It is our destiny to take our place in the galactic civilization which some of us believe to exist. 31. Into the 70s. Despite the negative conclusions reached by the Condon Committee in their report published early in 1969, many UFOs continue to be reported from all around the world by police officers, pilots, radar and control tower operators, and other responsible people. The press, too, are once more showing interest in the subject. At 11:40 a.m. on June 27, 1970, a great metallic disk came down on the surface of the South Atlantic, not much more than 500 meters from the Avenida Niemeyer, a famous coastal road cut out of the cliffs, running southwest from the Rio de Janeiro suburb of Leblon. This remarkable event was described by Dr. W. Buhler, in an article written for Flying Saucer Review. Dr. Buhler wrote, "The disk remained on the surface of the water there for half an hour, and 2 crewmen were seen inside it, wearing helmets and bright grayish aluminum-colored garments resembling the garb of our astronauts. When the disk took off, it left behind it on the sea a sort of ring or hoop, which had apparently served some function, perhaps as a float or stabilizer on which it had rested." He added, "This incident was observed by at least 8 witnesses. They were Señor Aristu Machado and his wife Doña Maria Nazaré Machado, who live at number 318, Avenida Niemeyer, and their neighbor and visitor, Señor João Aguiar, who is an official of the Brazilian Federal Police and resides nearby at number 210 on the same avenue. The 4th adult witness is the Machado's eldest daughter, Creuza, age 23. The remaining 4 witnesses were the rest of the Machado girls, Consuelo, age 14, Rosemary, age 10, Mererida, age 8, and Katya, age 5. In 1971 many UFOs were seen over Britain, concurrent with flaps over Scandinavia and Yugoslavia. The most interesting news items of that year were the reports in the French press that the gendarmerie now took UFOs very seriously. Mr. Gordon Creighton, in an article published in Flying Saucer Review, discussed this interesting development. Mr. Creighton pointed out that the gendarmerie's own journal, La Revue d'études et d'information de la Gendarmerie Nationale, carried a 9-page article on their approach to UFOs. The Flying Saucer Review article contained this extract from the one in the Gendarmerie Journal. What can we of the Gendarmerie do about this business? By virtue of the Gendarmerie's presence throughout the whole national territory of France, by virtue of its knowledge of places and, above all, of people, by virtue of the integrity and the intellectual honesty that are characteristic of its personnel, and also by virtue of the rapidity with which the Gendarmerie can be on the spot, they are well placed indeed to serve as a valuable auxiliary in the search for the truth about UFOs. Something is going on in our skies. Something that we do not understand. If all the airline pilots and Air Force pilots who have seen UFOs, and sometimes chase them, have been the victims of hallucinations, then an awful lot of pilots should be taken off and forbidden to fly. Early on New Year's Day, 1972, reports of UFOs came from all over Norway. They came from the control tower at Bergen, from aircraft, and from many towns, Eidsvoll, Moss, Oslo, Kristiansand and other places. The London Evening News dated March 22, 1972, reported that flying saucers had been seen landing in 3 separate areas of France during the previous 24 hours. We have just mentioned the interest of the French gendarmerie in UFOs, but it would appear from the following account in the Natal Daily News dated June 28, 1972, that the South African police are equally involved. Saucer, trailer, probe. Daily News correspondent Grahamstown, Wednesday. A small squad of specially trained police officers, under the leadership of Brigadier Vosloo, Divisional Commissioner of Police for the Eastern Cape, left for Fort Beaufort at dawn today to visit the farm Braeside, belonging to Mr. Benny Smith, over whose property a flying saucer was reported to have been seen for more than 4 hours on Monday. The object is to seek out, examine, photograph, and take plaster casts of more than 10 imprints left in the field by the unidentified flying object, to various points on the farmlands, before it disappeared into the thick bush nearby. The bush will also be thoroughly combed today by the police, seeking anything that might help them identify the nature of the mysterious flying object, should it have landed among the dense bush. Facts at police disposal so far include that the UFO made its initial appearance, first spotted by an African worker at about 8 a.m., and did not take off for the bush until noon, all the time in bright sunlight. In that time, at least 15 .303 rifle shots were fired at it, some by Mr. Smith, a crack shot, at a range of only 7 meters. The UFO was also seen and fired on by Warrant Officer P.R. Van Rensburg, police station commander at Fort Beaufort, who was telephoned by the farmer, and who drove immediately to Braeside, 15 kilometers away. Verbal descriptions tally that it was an oval object, gunmetal in color, about 3/4 of a mile across. It glowed and frequently changed color from green, to yellow, to white. Police already have photographs of imprints left on the ground by the UFO, it is thought. These were to have been released to the press yesterday by Brigadier Vosloo, but a later order countermanded this. The object was probably a small remote-controlled unmanned one doing some exploratory work here, just like the unmanned capsules we send up filled with tiny instruments into outer space. In another newspaper report from South Africa, Mr. Uli Resnick, a Johannesburg scientist, said the police action could have been suicidal. It was lucky, he commented, that the UFO had been impervious to the bullets. It seemed likely that the craft was powered by some sort of atomic energy. It was suicidal to shoot at it. If it had exploded, it could have destroyed the entire area. Now English reports are coming in of UFOs rising out of the reservoirs near Waltham Forest, and the Lee Valley to the north of London. There have been many reports throughout the world of UFOs diving into, and emerging from the seas. Only a few of the UFO sightings in the 70s have been mentioned here, but both sightings and landings are very much on the increase. It seems that the UFOs are becoming much bolder, and coming much closer. Maybe, we are heading for something big that will be momentous for mankind. Undoubtedly, the greatest story in the world today is that of the Sky People. The flying saucers are still with us. They have always been around, keeping watch over us. They started it all eons ago, the long saga of the flying saucer story. The fascinating celestial chariots of yesterday, the UFOs of today, the eternal subject.